Alrighty, well, today we have chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Some of these chapters aren't very long. That's why I kind of group them together to give you a pretty decent little episode. Now, one of the things I forgot to mention was this was the very first audio book that I narrated, and it was learn as you go, and depending on what you listen to it with, you may hear some echo. That was before I figured out that I had to do something about the acoustics in this room. But anyhow, you might get a little echo, and I apologize for that. And one of the little hints I forgot to give you for the first chapter was pay attention to the song on the jukebox. Okay? That is one of the major clues to the Easter egg. And if you missed it, I believe it was, the selection was N17. Now originally I was not going to tell you the name of the song. I was going to give you enough clues so that you could go and, if you didn't just get it from the clues, you could go and research it and find the song. But I just gave up on that, and even after asking a lot of people, if they had ever heard the song, most of them said yes. Do you remember the words to the song? Well, no. I don't. I take a lot of things for granted. I take way too many things for granted. I would just assume that everybody that over the age of 30 had heard this song and knew the words to it. But what can I say? You learn as you go. So anyhow, but that's as much of the hint as I'm going to give you for now. But just keep up with it, and that's part of the Easter egg. Now, the main question that seems to be posed is, who is the man in black? Well, that's one of the mysteries to the book. And you get a few more hints in these chapters to his identity, but there's a lot more throughout the book. So, I hope you enjoy. Chapter 3. Ronnie sat at his desk in the monitor room at one of the large internet hubs. He watched traffic flow, and if there was a delay, he would reroute traffic through different stations. He noticed a small spike in traffic on an obscure location. He checked the address and found it to just be a self-help page someone had put up privately on a small server. For the next few weeks, the spike got bigger and bigger. It wasn't his job to check or police for content, so he just rerouted traffic so it would flow better. After all, that was his job. After 4 weeks, the site obtained viral status. When this happened, Ronnie filed a report to his supervisor. The report was still sitting on the supervisor's desk when the black Suburbans showed up and the FBI agents took over. 3 weeks after Rich's death, the nightly news reported that the murder rate had risen slightly. The reporters played it up for a couple of days, each with his or her own theory. Then it got pushed back to the back burner. 3 months later, the murder rate had risen again. In fact, it had never slowed down. The police were not advertising this. In fact, they were trying to keep a lid on it. With all the state and federal cuts to their budgets, they simply could not handle an increase of this size. A lot of cases were not investigated at all. Very few were solved, and then it was the simple ones where there were a witness or videotape. Chapter 4. January 21st, 2009. Walter sat at his desk, enjoying his morning coffee and looking out the window at the White House lawn. Walter was the newly elected President of the United States of America, and he was determined to enjoy his morning coffee. He had warned his staff and Secret Service guards not to disturb him during this time except in dire emergencies. Walter laughed to himself and thought, I wonder how long that will last. He had been going to briefings and secret briefings for about 2 weeks now, but this was the first day he could sit in the Oval Office and say it was his. He finished his coffee and went into the next room. There was a long table with about a dozen people at it. This was his morning briefing. He sat down at the end and said, "Okay, let's get started." Most of the reports didn't change much on a daily basis. He heard the update from the Middle East, unemployment, and the economy. These were about the same as yesterday. Walter didn't have a clue what to do about the economy and the unemployment, but his promises on these issues was what got him elected. Better come up with something soon, Walter thought to himself, while someone rattled on about the trend in the stock market. The last 2 presidents had turned the country into a train wreck. The last president thought he could fix things by throwing money at it. That proved only to make matters worse. Truth be told, everything had been tried with little results. Walter was in a pickle, and he knew it. The last person to speak was the Director of Homeland Security. "Mr. President, we have noticed a small spike in the number of homicides lately." "Are the terrorists behind it?" Walter asked. "We don't think so, sir," the director answered. "The killings have been completely random, and so far no one famous or important." "Okay, keep an eye on it," Walter said. Chapter 5. Jason Parker sat at his desk mulling over a problem. He needed to get rid of an employee, but he couldn't just fire him. Jason had already fired 3 employees this month without good reason, and now they were all drawing unemployment. The owners of the company had seen their unemployment insurance rise and had chewed Jason out for not having airtight reasons for firing people. The truth was, Jason fired anyone who questioned his authority. The problem was none of the employees respected him. He had been warned by one of the older employees about earning respect, but Jason had seen even this as a question of his authority. "I don't care if they respect me, as long as they respect my position," Jason had told the older and much wiser man. The old man had just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, I tried." Jason had gotten the manager's position by lying, scheming, and kissing butt. The butt kissing was the most obvious. Even new employees picked up on it by the second day and lost any respect they had for Jason. Jason's problem today was Pedro, who had recently started questioning his authority openly in front of other employees. Pedro had even went behind Jason's back and complained to the owner about how he was being treated. Jason didn't care that Pedro was one of his best employees. In today's economy, there was always a line of people wanting a job, and Jason had discovered that the more desperate they were, the more he could abuse them. He looked at them as if they were just rented mules. If they broke a leg, you shot them and rented another one. Jason tried to think of some weakness Pedro had that he could use against him. "Okay, he drinks a little, but never comes to work drunk," Jason thought to himself. "I wonder if he might smoke a little grass. It's worth a shot." Jason knew the owner couldn't tolerate drugs. Jason picked up the phone and called one of the owners. "I think I have a couple of employees coming to work high." "Get them tested immediately," the owner said. "Yes, sir." Jason went out into the shop and picked another employee he knew would pass the test, and Pedro. He called both of them aside and told them, as a new company policy, they were going to start surprise random drug testing, which was of course a lie. Jason could tell by the look on Pedro's face that he might have gotten lucky. Pedro had indeed taken a couple of puffs from a joint at a friend's house the night before. Pedro had in fact had a drug problem years ago, but had cleaned up his life greatly. The problem had caused a lot of tension between Pedro and his wife. She had left him on several occasions, and now their marriage was just hanging by a string. The next day, Jason got the results. Pedro's test had come back inconclusive. Jason couldn't believe the results. There had been something in Pedro's face, he was sure of it. He called Pedro to his office. "Sit down, Pedro. We got the test results back. Yours was inconclusive." "What does that mean?" Pedro asked. "It means you will have to take the test again." Jason could see a little sweat starting to bead on Pedro's forehead. He knew he had him. "There is another option," Jason said. "You can resign, and in 30 days we will hire you back, if you can pass the test." Pedro felt trapped. He didn't know how long it took to get a couple of puffs out of his system. And what would his wife say if he lost his job? His only option seemed to be to take the offer. "You guarantee you'll hire me back?" Pedro asked. "Of course," Jason said, although he had no intentions of hiring Pedro back. If he could get Pedro to resign, it would be almost impossible for him to get unemployment. "Okay, let's do that," Pedro said. "Good. I'll see you in 30 days then," Jason said as he shook Pedro's hand. "Oh, Pedro, don't say anything to any of the other employees about this, or the deal's off." Jason knew there were some of the employees that would see through this scam in a heartbeat. He couldn't risk them telling Pedro. As Pedro was gathering his stuff, Jim Blackstone, a co-worker and good friend of Pedro's, inquired about the meeting. Pedro told him the whole story. "Don't tell them I said anything to you." "Okay. I think you're getting played." "I'll call you if anything comes up," Jim said. When Pedro told his wife what had happened, she basically lost it. She screamed, then cried, then screamed some more. Finally, she packed up, took the kid, and left. Pedro was devastated. He just sat in the living room for about an hour. Finally, he thought, "I need a drink." He drove to the outskirts of town to a small bar. He knew not many people came out here, and he was in no mood for a lot of noise. There was only 2 cars in the parking lot outside. Just right, Pedro thought. He went in and sat down at the bar and ordered a beer. He had only enough money for 2 beers, so it looked like a short night. Pedro was on his second and last beer when another man walked into the bar. The man stopped at the jukebox, then sat down at the bar next to Pedro. Pedro didn't look at the man. He was in no mood for company. Out of the corner of his eye, Pedro saw the man toss a $100 bill onto the bar. "A shot of your best, barkeep, and rounds for the house, as long as this lasts." There was only one other person in the bar, a man sitting in the corner who had not moved since Pedro came in. Pedro did the math, and the result was this meant a lot of free beer for him. The bartender brought the shot and another beer for Pedro. Pedro turned to thank the man, but now, seeing him clearly, made him hesitate and stutter a little. The thank you. The man had on the blackest suit Pedro had ever seen. It was like the man was a living shadow. A chill ran down Pedro's back. "Not at all, friend," the dark man replied. "You looked like you could use a few more." There was something in the man's voice Pedro couldn't quite put his finger on, but there was something there. "You can say that again." "Rough one, eh? Tell me about it." Pedro usually didn't spill his guts to strangers in bars, but he found himself telling this man the whole story. When he finished, the dark man said, "I see." The man in black looked like he was deep in thought for a few moments, then said, "You know, in football, if someone cheats, the referees step in and penalize them. It would be nice if that would happen in real life." "It sure would," Pedro said. The dark man finished his drink, stood up, and put his hand on Pedro's shoulder. "Here's something that might help," he said, as he handed what appeared to be a business card to Pedro. Pedro glanced at the card. The only thing printed on it appeared to be a website address. Since the man had bought him some beers, Pedro thought he could at least be nice. "Thank you, sir," he said, and put the card in his shirt pocket. The dark man turned and started for the door. He stopped and appeared to give the man in the corner a card as well, then left. Pedro thought that was weird. He drank 4 more beers on the stranger's money, then went home. The next morning he awoke in the same clothes he had been wearing the day before. He looked around for a moment as the previous day's reality came crashing back. "Well, I better start looking for a job," he thought. He sat down at the family's computer and fired it up. As it was booting, Pedro checked his pockets for his cigarettes. He found the card the strange man had given him. He looked at it more closely now. www.terminalin.com. What the hell, Pedro thought, and typed in the address. He had been studying the website for about 20 minutes when the phone rang. It was Jim calling to tell Pedro about the new employee. Sure enough, the next day, a new employee had appeared in Pedro's place. Jim approached the new man and casually asked when he was hired. "It was kind of weird. They called me and said I was hired, but it might be a week before I could come to work." I'm just glad to have a job." "They already had this guy waiting in the wings," Jim told Pedro. "I thought they were playing you. They got you to resign so you couldn't draw unemployment." "Thanks for calling, Jim. If there's anything I can do, just let me know." "I'll let you know if there is." "Okay. Keep in touch." Pedro hung up the phone and looked at the website. He didn't have cancer, but he had very little left to lose, he thought. It's time for a ref. Jason's favorite pastime was to take his 4x4 truck up in the hills outside of town. There were trails and old fire roads that went on for miles and miles. On this weekend, he was about 10 miles from town and had worked his way up the backside of a ridge. The trail was a bit dangerous. On the left it dropped straight down about 15 feet, and on the right was the rock face of the hill. Jason had been down this trail many times, and wasn't paying too much attention to it. Suddenly it felt as if the left side tires had run off the trail. He turned to the right, but it was too late. The truck slid down the side of the hill for a few feet, then started to tumble. The truck rolled over twice before coming to rest at the bottom. The truck landed on the driver's side. Jason was able to crawl out the passenger side window. He was bruised and cut up a bit, but nothing real bad. He slowly climbed back up the hill and examined the trail. The trail was mostly made up of big rocks, or solid rocks, that were part of the hill itself. He looked closely at where it had given way. It appeared that for about 10 feet the rocks had been removed and sand put in its place. He looked more closely and saw that whoever did it had to wet the sand to get it to stay in place. "Somebody's going to pay for this," Jason thought as he made his way back down the hill. There was no way he could right the truck by himself, so he got out his cell phone to call for help. Just as he brought the phone to his ear, he saw a flash out of the corner of his eye. Then the cell phone seemed to explode in his hand. He yelped in pain and looked at his hand. His index finger was missing. Jason grabbed his injured hand and started to run in the direction of town. He saw another flash from the desert and heard the gunshot right after his right knee exploded. He fell to the ground screaming in agony. When his vision cleared, Jason could see a man walking in from the desert. He could tell he had a rifle. Jason tried to move, but his knee was in agony. All he could do was lay there and wait. The man got closer. "Pedro, is that you?" "What's up, Jefe?" "Did you do this?" "Yes, I did." "For Christ's sakes, why?" "Well, quite a few reasons, really. Let's see. You conned me into quitting. That made my wife leave, and she took my kid. Basically, you ruined my life." No, I didn't do that." "A liar to the end, eh, Jason?" "Your knee looks pretty bad. Here, let me help." Pedro raised the rifle and shot Jason's good knee. Jason howled in pain. "They match now. Isn't that better?" "Well, it will be dark soon, and it's a long walk back to where I parked." "You can't leave me out here alone." "Oh, don't worry. The coyotes will be here in a little while to keep you company." Pedro turned and walked away. Jason continued begging and pleading long after Pedro was out of earshot. Pedro walked to where he had parked his truck. He walked up the hill to where some boulders were piled together. Carefully, he dislodged a few of these. This caused a small avalanche that destroyed the trail. It would take some heavy equipment to make it passable. Pedro got in his truck and drove back to town. As he got to the interstate, he stopped. North was the way to town. He sat there weighing his options. Finally, he said to himself, "Oh yeah, I can speak Spanish," and with that he turned south. 3 months later, the county cleared the trail and discovered the wrecked truck. The sheriff's department was called out. There were a few bones scattered about in the immediate area. The detectives ruled it as an accident and went on to more pressing cases. Chapter 6. Matt Naylor was just trying to enjoy a few beers at his local bar. He had intentionally sat at a back table to avoid anyone. The bartender arrived with 2 more beers that Matt had not ordered. "One of the guys at the bar is buying the house a few rounds," he explained. Matt had a lot on his mind after seeing his doctor, and just wanted a quiet place to think. By the time Matt was on his 3rd free beer, a man walked up to his table. "Here we go," Matt thought. The man, however, just handed Matt a card and said, "This might help," and left. Matt was so surprised by the man's actions, he put the card in his pocket. Matt just sat there, slowly peeling the label off his beer bottle. He was reflecting on the news he had gotten that morning and how he was going to deal with it. Matt had been sitting in an examination room at his local hospital, waiting on his doctor to bring his test results. He had tried to keep an open mind about this, but his headaches had gotten worse and more frequent. The doctor came in holding a thick folder. He did not look happy. "Mr. Naylor, there's no good way of saying this. Your test results show you have a brain tumor that is causing your headaches." Matt felt like someone hit him in the stomach with a baseball bat. "I have shown your results to our surgeons, and they all agree the tumor is inoperable." "What does that mean?" Matt asked. "Simply put, if we try to remove it, you will die." "What do we do?" "Well, there are some other treatments we can try. But for a tumor this big and aggressive, it's pretty much a waste of time." "How long do I have?" "My guess is about 3 months. I can give you something for the headaches." "Thank you, doctor." "You should think about getting your affairs in order." "You're probably right." Later that night, after Matt got home, he was cleaning his pockets before he got undressed, and he found the card the strange man had given him. What could it hurt, Matt thought, as he sat down at his computer. He typed in the address on the card. A website popped up. After reading a few pages, Matt was a little confused, because he didn't have cancer. But he kept on reading. After a few more pages, he got to the part about nothing to lose. That hit home. That definitely applies to me, he thought. He finished reading the remaining pages, turned off the computer, and went to bed. The next morning, Matt got up and went to work, more out of habit than fear of losing his job. As he was driving, he kept thinking about the website. He looked down at the speedometer. It read 55. He slowly goosed it up to 65, thinking, what are they going to do, take my license away? Matt worked at an automotive service center. He pretty much hated going to work these days. Recently, they had gotten a new store manager. He was an older guy that had spent most of his life in the military. The new manager was very hard to get along with, and demanded a lot of respect, although he had earned none. As Matt walked in the back door, he saw that the manager had one of the younger employees hemmed up in a corner and was chewing him out severely. When Matt walked up, the manager backed off and walked away. Why do you let him do that? Matt asked. I really need my job. Don't you have a cell phone? Yes. Next time he does that, just hit the record button. Then you can take that to the owner. That's a good idea. I'll try to remember. Later that day, the manager demanded Matt do something that was not part of his job. Matt refused and asked to speak to the owner. You're not going to talk to anyone. In fact, you're fired. Get your stuff and leave. Something inside Matt snapped. The anger that had started rising suddenly went away. He felt calm and at ease. Okay, Matt said calmly, turning and walking toward his car. When he got to his car, Matt reached under the driver's seat and got the pistol he kept there for protection. He checked to make sure it was fully loaded, with one in the chamber. He flipped the safety off and walked back into the building. Matt walked into the front sales department. The manager had his back turned to him and was busy chewing out two of the salesmen. Matt raised the gun to the back of the manager's head. As he did this, the eyes on both salesmen began to widen. Just as one of them screamed, "Look out!" Matt pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The manager's brain splattered both of the salesmen. One fell to the floor and started to vomit. Out of the corner of his eye, Matt detected movement in the owner's office. Matt quickly moved to the doorway. Freeze, Matt told the owner, who had been trying to find the gun he kept in the lower drawer. Get your hands up, Matt commanded. The owner raised his hands into the air. Matt took careful aim and fired. One of the fingers on the owner's right hand vanished. He screamed in pain and clutched his hand. You have 9 more, Matt told him. If you hire another asshole, me or someone like me will take off another one. Who do you think you are? Screamed the owner. I'm someone with nothing to lose, Matt answered. You're just nuts. I can see by your attitude that you do not intend to heed my warning." And with that, Matt raised the gun and put 3 rounds into the owner's chest. Matt then turned back to the salesman. One was still frozen in fear. The other was still on the floor throwing up. "Tell the police I'll be in the break room." Matt walked to the small break room, put his gun on the table, sat down, leaned back, and waited. Matt had such a calm feeling he almost dozed off before the police arrived and mustered up the courage to come into the room. Matt offered no resistance as he was handcuffed and put in the squad car. At his preliminary hearing, the judge set the trial date for 5 months. He also asked Matt if he had anything to say on his behalf. Matt's lawyer advised against it, but Matt stood up. "Your Honor, if you had read all the police reports, like you should have, you would know I only have a couple of months to live. So good luck with that trial." This brought a buzz from the people in the courtroom, and even some laughter. The judge pounded his gavel and ordered silence. He cautioned Matt that he would be found in contempt of court. Even though Matt was handcuffed, he was still able to raise his hands high enough to flip the judge a bird. This brought another round of laughter from the crowd. The judge pounded on his gavel, trying to restore some kind of order. Matt just smiled and waved to the crowd. 2 weeks later, while awaiting trial, Matt died peacefully in his sleep from a brain aneurysm. Chapter 7. The new president was having a hard time getting the economy to turn around. No matter what he tried, it seemed to be heading off a cliff. He was presently in a meeting with his top economic advisors. They presented a few different plans, but the previous 2 presidents had tried them with little or no results. "Come on, guys. You're the best economic minds in the country, and this is the best you can do?" The people at the table just looked back at him with blank expressions. Walter just shook his head, then put his head in his hands. One man at the table wasn't looking at the president. He was busy drinking coffee and eating donuts. This was the president's most trusted advisor. In fact, it was because of this man that Walter had gotten elected. "That will be all for now, gentlemen," Walter tells the room. They all left except for the man dressed in black, eating donuts. The president looked up. "Damn it, B, can't you at least wear a red tie?" "You know this is a matching set, Walter." "What am I going to do about this economy?" "Walter, you will find that these things have a way of fixing themselves if you just leave them alone." "I wish you would talk in plain English." "That's way too boring," replied the man in black. "I have a meeting later today with the Director of Homeland Security, and I would like you to sit in on it." "Sure, no problem," the dark man replied. The Director of Homeland Security was in the waiting room outside the Oval Office. "You can go in now," the secretary said. He got up, straightened his coat and tie, and went in. To his left sat the man in black. The director didn't trust this man, but the president seemed to. The president waved at a chair in front of his desk, and the director took a seat. Walter looked up. He really didn't know this man. He had not appointed him. He was a leftover from the previous administration. "What have you got?" "Mr. President, I have just completed a study that shows the murder rate for the country has risen by 30% since we last spoke." "My God, why was I not informed sooner?" "Well, sir, it took a while to complete and double-check the study." "How long is a while?" "I believe it was about 30 days. "So you're telling me that you knew about this 30 days ago?" A worried look came over the director's face. "What's the name of your second in command?" "That would be Thomas Gray, sir." "And where is he at this moment?" "I believe he's a couple of buildings over, giving a speech." The president pushed his intercom button. "Janet, get me Thomas Gray. I need him in my office in 10 minutes. "Yes, sir," the voice replied. "Send the Secret Service to get him." "Yes, sir." The president then pushed a small button concealed on the underside of his chair's armrest. 6 Secret Service agents seemed to instantly appear in the room. "Gentlemen," the president said, addressing the agents, "the Director of Homeland Security no longer works for us. Please escort him to his office to collect his personal things, then get him the hell out of here." There was no hesitation in the agents. They and the director were gone inside of 3 seconds. "Are you sure you can do that?" asked the man in black. "Being president has to count for something, B.